Good evening and welcome to Learning to Listen, Class 21 and 22. In Class 21, we went over the first couple types of searches in more detail, but we had some technical difficulty and ran out of class time, so I decided to just recover it in Class 22, and that's what we did. This is an overview of what we did in Class 21 and 22. In Class 21 and 22, we started going through the different search types and how you will use it to study wisely. Search engines, topical indexes, keywords, artificial intelligence, how to use that wisely, concordance, commentary, and suites. We will get through the first couple today. Some general search guidelines. Search engines, such as Google, are good to find where a verse is located. For instance, if you know the text of a verse but you don't know where it's found, Google is a good place to find that. Artificial intelligence is a good place to get a list of keywords that will help you represent a concept fully. But when you want to draw conclusions, remember to directly read the Bible for yourself. We talked about why. For instance, artificial intelligence is using all of the information available on the internet to draw conclusions. Some of that information is correct and some of it is not. When I copy and paste chapters into artificial intelligence to make study guides for my kids, you would be surprised how many times the artificial intelligence software misquotes a verse. Oftentimes it does not change its meaning, but occasionally it does. It will leave out whole sections, add new sections that aren't there, or even change the meaning to the opposite. Nothing seems intentional. It's just too much information to put together, and it ends up changing things. So you don't want to draw your conclusions directly from things that you're getting from artificial intelligence software. You want to read directly from the Bible to draw your conclusions. Let's talk about search engines, such as Google. Let's say you know the idea of a verse, but you need the reference so you can look it up and get some context. A good comparison is like medical research. You can use Google to find the keywords you want to look for and help it link you to reputable sites, but you are not going to use Google to read everything that you find. That would guide you to an entire bank of reputable sites and not so reputable sites, good information and garbage, and you would be stuck sorting through which was which. And as much as God is our guide, He does not want us to fill our minds with the garbage while we're looking through for His truth. As I recently listened to a sermon, the pastor was saying how taken back he was when he was talking to a bank teller. She explained that when they were looking for false bills, they had many classes and were refreshed frequently, but the only thing they ever did was study the true bills. Why? Because if you spend all of your time studying what real bills look like and how they work, you will immediately spot counterfeits. In the same way, when we read God's Word, we don't want to fill our mind with all kinds of garbage and try and sift through it. We want to fill our minds with God's truth the first time. And that's why we use Google to find the keywords and to link to reputable sites that we know we can trust and read the Bible directly. We're not going to read through Google directly, as it will be listing out all of the garbage and all of the truth, all mixed in together. And that is not a good way to do research on what the Bible has to say. So for an activity, we're going to try and find the reference for a verse. And then we will link to a reputable Bible site and read it from there, instead of straight from Google or artificial intelligence. What we are not going to do is search for the answer to our question directly in Google. but to find the verse and the reference. One of the classmates asked about a verse that she did not know where the reference was. So, as a class, we looked it up together. It said something about run with the footmen. When we look it up, we see that it's from Jeremiah 12:5. Now we could read the AI synopsis, but we're not going to. We're going to use the web search to find the verse, Jeremiah 12:5. Then we're going to use the web search to link to a reputable site. One of them we've already used in this class is Bible Gateway, so we will click that. When we looked it up in class, this is what we got. If thou hast run with the footmen, and thou have wearied thee, then how canst thou contend with horses? And if in the land of peace, wherein thou trustedst, they wearied thee, then how wilt thou do in the swelling of Jordan? Most of the people in the class made funny faces when we read this, so we decided to check a different version. I checked the voice because it's the current version I'm reading through, and my husband liked it a lot. One of the reasons we like it is because the translators were attempting to translate for the best meaning for meaning translation they could find. It was a group of people instead of one person, and they put their commentary of what they think and why they did what they did in the verse, as you can see in gray here. But remember, that's people's opinion. The Bible is the Bible. It's true. People's opinion is people's opinion. Some of it's true, some of it's not. So, we reread the verse. In the voice, it says who's talking. Here, God is talking. It says, Eternal One. If you are worn out after only running with a few men, how will you one day compete against horses? If you stumble on the easy terrain, how will you manage in the thick brush near the Jordan? So we read the commentary. It says Jeremiah's complaint is a common one. It is as old as civilization itself. Why do the wicked prosper? Why do good people have to wait for God's justice? God doesn't shrink back from such questions. He does not punish those who dare ask them. In fact, Scripture invites us to ask God the hard questions through Jeremiah's example. The answers to hard questions are never easy. In fact, as Jeremiah will soon discover, his troubles are only beginning. God calls him again to endure. When we read the verse, and then the commentary, everyone wanted to read it in context, which is exactly what we're talking about, how to study the Bible. She wanted to know about the verse. We found the reference in Google and linked to a reputable site in Google. Once we got to Bible Gateway, we changed the version to something that we understood. This one even has commentary to help us understand. But without reading it in context, we weren't exactly sure what was going on. So I hit the Read Full Chapter button. And we started reading. It tells you at the beginning of verse 12, Jeremiah is talking. Jeremiah, Eternal, you always do what is right. When I bring a complaint your way, so now let me put a case before you. Why do the wicked prosper so much? Why do all the untrustworthy have it so easy? You plant them and watch them take root. You allow them to grow and even bear fruit. And yet, your words mean nothing to them deep down. Still you know me, Eternal One. You see what is deep inside me. You've examined my heart. So why aren't they brought to justice? Deal with them as sheep set aside for slaughter, singled out for death. How long must the land cry out in mourning? The grasses of the field wither and bake in the sun. The birds and wild animals have simply vanished, all because of the wicked living here, because they say, God does not see what will become of us. And this is where God starts, the verse that we were on. God says, if you are worn out after only running with a few men, how will you one day compete against horses? If you stumble on easy terrain, how will you manage in the thick brush near the Jordan? Jeremiah, even your brothers and the rest of your family are ready to betray you. Even they cry out for your death. Don't trust any of them, no matter how nicely they speak to your face." Then God goes on to give more prophecies about what will happen to his people as they have turned their backs on him and keep killing his prophets, and in Jeremiah's case, continue treating him very badly, setting traps for him, putting him in chains. Even his family was out to get him. Jeremiah had tried before this to plead the case of the people in his family and God's people, and what God was telling him is, not only were God's people plotting against him, but so was his own family, and that he needed to trust God and prophesy just like God was asking him to, so people knew what was coming and they had a chance to turn away from their ways. As you can see in this activity, we've found the reference for the verse using Google. Then, from Google, we linked to Bible Gateway. Once we were at Bible Gateway, we picked a version we could understand to read it directly from the Bible. We did not read all of the ideas or answer our question from Google itself. We used it to find the verse and link to a reputable site so we could read it directly from the Bible. We ended class with personal testimonies. There were several testimonies given by the members of the class. The first testimony was from one of the members who had previously said they'd lost their job, but how God had given them peace and taken away their resentment, and had challenged them and asked them to continue walking without resentment and in perfect peace with the Lord, and that he had his reward for him. It was part of his deliverance for his family and him. He reported today that he was blessed by the human resources representative informing him that he would be allowed to stay an extra month and that they would even help with the tuition for the continuing education classes he was taking, which was a great blessing. And also shared about how difficult it can be to remain in God's peace. Once the classmate had the clarity of what God wanted him to do and how to be still, at first it seemed a lot easier. But as the waiting period has come, and he's waiting for God to reveal what his next steps are, he's starting to get uneasy, wanting to know what the next step is, and continuing to rest in God and stay at peace so that he can be with God and not step out of that perfect place God has for him. He shared how he spoke out of resentment one time, and God corrected him quickly and said, "Don't do that again," and gave him another chance. And he quickly changed the story back to God's story and how God was the one directing the steps. It didn't matter if it was fair or not fair. He trusted God and knew that God was guiding him. There was another testimony of a classmate who said that God gives her a song. In the morning when she wakes up, he gives her a song and she spends her special time with him. And that sometimes he speaks to her by waking her up and telling her about important things. She shared a story about how at one point God kept telling her to get up and to check on her son. And she knew he would be okay, so she wasn't worried about it. And she kept ignoring it. And then finally, with God continuing to wake her up, she said, "Oh, okay, I will get up." And she got up and went to check on her son. But he wasn't there. He had gotten out of the house. And when she went down to look for him, he was locked outside from the sliding glass door. And he had explained the situation and how distraught he was about something. They had a long conversation, but she was so glad that God had woken her up and that she could be there for that moment. She wasn't sure how things would have gone if she hadn't been awake right then. In the next class, we'll talk about how to use a topical index and then continue going through our list of resources so that we can all have a good understanding of how to study the Bible to find God's truth and not preconceived ideas or things that just align with what we want them to be. We want to read for God's truth. We want to search well. So good evening, and until next time, please keep practicing and studying and listening. Thank you for taking your time with us, so that step by step, we can learn how to rest in God and study His Word to know His truth.